I'm really excited today. We have a very special guest, Sharon Solomon. Now, Sharon is the author of a number of wonderful picture books and also of a, what would you call this, Sharon? It's a
I call it
chapter
an
book?
early chapter book.
A chapter book, which I have to tell you, I just enjoyed tremendously. Her chapter book is called How a Lemonade Lid Changed My Summer. Welcome, Sharon. It's so good to see you here today.
Thank you.
Sharon, what got you started writing?
Well, my first book came out as science plays. I was a teacher, a reading specialist, and the young children didn't understand the textbook. So I started writing these funny science plays with wacky characters and songs and art activities to reinforce what they didn't get from the textbooks.
That's so funny because my first books were also science books because the kids didn't understand the textbook. You know, as teachers, it's so difficult when you see a child who's struggling like that. And so you create your own materials?
I started typing them up and bringing them into the classroom, and we would do it, the whole class would do the play before they had a quiz.
Where were you teaching?
In Berkeley Heights, New Jersey.
Okay.
Northern New Jersey.
All right. So how did the kids react when you did these things?
Well, I knew I had a hit when one of the gifted students in the class was writing, and I said, "Why are you writing while we're supposed to be reading?" She said, "Because I want to make a copy of this so I can take this home and do it with my brother." And I said, "I'll give you a copy." And then I decided if I could get 10 of these plays together, maybe I could get someone to publish it.
And did you publish them?
Yes, it was published by Pieces of Learning in Illinois.
And are they still available?
They are. They've been out since 2002, and it's still a big seller because science is a big topic.
You know, it seems your books fill a real need. Let's talk about some of these books right now. We have How a Lemonade Lid Changed My Summer. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Okay, well, I'd like to say that I drink a lot of a very well-known iced tea. And one day I popped the lid and it had a little fun fact in it that said that the average lead pencil can draw a line 35 miles long. And I said to my husband, "How do they know that?" And he said they must test it somehow. And I decided to create a town, a fictitious little town. I made a little map. And
So none of this really happened.
No.
But it seems so real when you write it.
well, because there's always bullies, and the twins, I'm a twin, and I made them a boy and a girl because I want both boys and girls to read it. I don't want this to be a boy's book or a girl's book.
And it really isn't. It's a very educational but fun book. And it's not a long read either. I think kids will love it. But I also think parents and grandparents will love it. So tell us a little bit more about the book. We have Sam and Abby who are about to have what they consider to be a very boring summer.
Absolutely. They live in Jackson City, named after their grandparents, and there's not much to do except ice cream bowling and the swimming pool. And then they pop a lid and they set out to see whether they can earn scout badges to prove whether the average lead pencil can draw a line 35 miles long.
Which is absolutely an amazing thing to contemplate, that they have this pencil. How do you actually, and don't give us a spoiler, but how do you actually figure out that a pencil can go 35 miles? This is the fun part of the book. This, and of course the way they solve the problem about the bully.
Right.
Do you have an excerpt for us?
I do. I'm going to just read from the beginning so you can see how it all started. Sam is speaking. He's the 8-year-old brother. "On the first day of summer vacation, I was already bored. Every year I did the same old thing in Jackson City. Clean my room, go to the pool, or ride my bike. Then in September, my new teacher would ask me to write what I did last summer. There won't be much to tell. I needed to get up the nerve to punch out Joey Gordon's lights. He lived right across the street, and his parents were our scout leaders. So you'd think they'd know that their son was a bully. I put up with him in 2nd grade, but I made up my mind that he wouldn't bully me in 3rd grade. What I Did Last Summer by Sam Jackson. It could be interesting after all." And then he goes on to tell about how he was drinking his lemonade, and that's when Abby popped her lid. "The only insect that can turn its head is a praying mantis. My turn," I said. "The average lead pencil can draw a line 35 miles long. "How far is that, Mom?" Abby asked. "It's about a half mile from here to Grandma's house, so if you walk there and back 35 times, that's how far." And then they have a discussion about that. In chapter 2, Abby says, "I wonder what's been going on between Sam and Joey. It's weird because Sam never said anything about this before, but Joey told him to watch his back."
And we're going to stop right there, because that's the fun part of the book. You know, as a parent and a former teacher, I found so much of value in this book. What do you think a grandparent will feel when they pick up this book for their child?
Well, I have friends that are grandparents that have read this book and then given it to their grandchildren. And if they're in Scouts, they read it to the children, and then if the children are old enough, they'll go off and read it by themselves. If they're in Scouts, they're very interested because there are actual badges. So I researched that. And if there's bullies, and I think everybody's been bullied at one time or another, that would give them confidence to see that there was a solution here.
Now, the book is called How a Lemonade Lid Changed My Summer. And where's this book available?
It's available in Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, and from Solstice Publishing.
And I do recommend it very highly. I had a lot of fun with this book. Now, you're a person who writes a lot of different kinds of things, and you have another wonderful book called A Walk with Grandpa. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, actually, the real Grandpa doesn't look like this. He's a lot thinner. But I'm the one that took a walk with my granddaughter. But I put the Grandpa in because I was very well aware that if there was a grandmother and a granddaughter, boys wouldn't want to read it. And you needed to have a male in the book. But Ella, my granddaughter, who's now 11, went on a walk with me about 4 or 5 years ago, and we played this word game of antonyms and synonyms.
Now, the word game is just so charming, and the book has wonderful illustrations, and it's a very moving book. Do you have a section you could share with us?
My favorite part.
You're not going to give away the ending, are you?
Oh, no.
Now, this word game, you know, we all have things we love to do with our kids and with our grandkids. And this is, I don't know how to explain this word game.
Well, as we went to the river, we played, I didn't tell her it was antonyms, opposites. She got it. I'd say, you're my hello, and she'd say, you are my goodbye. You are my lost, you're my found. Then we got to the river. They sat on a big gray rock looking down at the river. Daniela kicked her feet as she watched the reflections in the water. Then she hugged her grandpa. I love you, Pop-Pop, she said. And I love you, my little tulip, said Grandpa.
Now, what I like about this book, now, is this the one that's also bilingual?
This is bilingual. This comes in English or English with Spanish underneath and a little glossary in the back.
And how did that work out? How did you go ahead and do that?
Well, I saw in one of my children's writers magazines that Raven Tree, who was a bilingual publisher, was looking for short, simple books about family relationships. And I had this book already written, so I sent it to them. And they did cut some words out to make it more simple.
Yeah. And the book has, you know, there's some books that are for children that are just so moving, and they make the adults feel good too. Was that one of your objectives?
When I wrote the book, Ella and I had a feel-good day. And I had called her Tulip before she was born. I had written a book for her. And every day I wrote a little thing to Tulip. I saw a white bunny rabbit, and when you're born, we're going to see bunny rabbits together. So that was her nickname, and I managed to get it into the book. And so, yes, it was a day I had with my granddaughter, and I was hoping to convey the love of the grandfather and the granddaughter, as well as do this word play.
Now, when we come back, we're going to be talking to Sharon about 2 other books and her new book as well that are totally different. Sharon, you are amazing in your breadth and in your scope, and I think parents and grandparents should know your name. Again, Sharon Solomon is the author of How a Lemonade Lid Changed My Summer. One final question. The solution to that problem of measuring how far a pencil will go on paper, did you ever try it?
No.
We'll be back with Sharon on our next segment.
And folks, this Appalachian music was arranged and performed exclusively for our new show, Boomers Plus Radio, by Lisa, Jim, and Owen Cummins, whose book, Orchard Hill, is now available at Amazon.com. So please tell your friends and family about the exciting new program for adults from the producers of Author's Beat.
I'm really pleased to welcome back Sharon Solomon, who is an author who has done so many different things. In our last segment, we talked about 2 of her books, The Charming A Walk with Grandpa, and also the other one, which I loved, was How a Lemonade Lid Changed My Summer, where she has children tackling the amazing problem of how a pencil can really draw a line 35 miles long. And in that book, children learn by trial and error. Let me ask you, what were you like as a child?
Well, you have to understand I'm an identical twin. So what one of us didn't think of for getting into trouble, the other one did. And I just remember getting in trouble, playing in my sandbox, making mud pies, playing hopscotch, Monopoly, having a gang of kids to play with down the street.
Really? Wow. Now, what's interesting, too, is how it impacted on your other books, because you have found a wonderful, wonderful niche. As a former classroom teacher myself, I just think your books are very valuable. So let's talk about the different side of Sharon Solomon, because today let's talk about Christopher Newport, Jamestown Explorer, and Kathy Williams, Buffalo Soldier. These are very different kinds of books than the other two. Can you explain how they are?
They're picture book biographies, and I was fortunate enough to get the Kathy Williams Buffalo Soldier book published by Pelican. Her story had been, I wrote it and rewrote it in many different ways, and it had been rejected 25 times.
Which proves again that we should never give up.
Never.
Believe me, I've had walls full of rejection letters, so I congratulate you because Pelican is a wonderful publisher, and they've done a great job on your books. The illustrations are beautiful in both of these books. Which one did you do first?
First, I did the Kathy Williams Buffalo Soldier book. What happened is I was still teaching 7 years ago in New Jersey, and I read a lot of children's books because they help me to see what good writing is.
I love children's books. Picture books are wonderful.
Well, what happened is I was just reading this for myself. I was reading a book by Pam Ryan called Writing Freedom. And it was a true story, and it was a middle grade chapter book, and it was about a woman that disguised herself as a man, and she drove stagecoaches, and nobody knew she was a man until she died, and they had to lay her out in her casket. And I said, that's really cool. I went on the computer and I typed in Pioneer Women of the West. I got names like Annie Oakley, and I got Kathy Williams, and I said, who's that?
And I never heard of her either, so I'm very fascinated by it. Tell us, what made Kathy Williams so special that attracted you to her?
Well, the fact that when she was born a slave in Missouri, and her father lived on another farm, and when he was sold, that she never saw him again since she was 4 years old. And I try to picture, how does that feel? Kathy was illiterate. Slaves weren't allowed to learn to read or write, so she didn't keep a diary. But I imagine that was a heartbreaking experience. And then when she was 6, she and her mother were sold to another plantation. So how does it feel to be standing there like, a piece of meat that you would buy in a butcher shop, and somebody's going to buy you?
And yet she is really kind of a role model for modern day women, and certainly for little girls. What does she actually do that makes her so spectacular?
Well, she's my kind of woman because she
I'm moving to the other side of the room.
No, because she could have just cried and said, I can't read or write, I can't do this or that. They took her away after she was freed from slavery. The Union soldiers took her as contraband to be a cook and laundress, and she never saw her mother again. And there's no telephone, she couldn't write letters, and she was by herself, but she was with these other former slaves. And I try to picture, how did she feel when the Union Army marched through Shreveport and they saw the tobacco and the cotton being burned, and they freed more slaves? She was part of the Union soldiers freeing slaves. How did she feel when she took a steamboat to what she called Washington City, and then she rode out on horseback to the Shenandoah Valley, and she cooked meals for General Philip Sheridan? I visited that house. That plantation in Middletown, Virginia is still there.
So again, going back to Kathy herself,
right.
You try capturing her feelings, and she does something that's so strange. She disguises herself and as a man,
right.
And what does she do then?
And she changes her name from Kathy Williams to William Cathay. She just flipped her name around,
right.
And she signed with an X. And she was 5'9", and she was strong, and they mustn't have examined her, and she got in the Army for 2 years.
Well, in those days, I'm sure it was much more simple, really, for her to fool people. But the book, I think, and I don't want to go any more into it, the book is, again, I think, a very positive role model for girls, because
yes.
She does not give up.
Right.
She certainly doesn't accept the idea that certain jobs are only for men. And so I think children of all races, both male, female, black, white, can learn from this wonderful book. It's called Kathy Williams' Buffalo Soldier. And let's talk about the illustrations. It's illustrated by Doreen Lorenzetti.
Yes.
Did you have anything to do with the illustrations, or was this the publisher's work?
Doreen and I were in a writing group in New Jersey.
Oh.
And she's an artist, and she does some writing, but mostly art. And she sent their work into Pelican, and they accepted her to illustrate this.
That's very unique, because generally the publisher, selects their own illustrators. So
That's
I think
right.
It's a very, very nicely done book. I really enjoyed it. Let's talk about your other book, Christopher Newport, Jamestown Explorer. Tell us a little bit about this, because again, here's another person I never heard about. How did you come across Christopher Newport?
I just believe in fate. I was at my son's house, and the Kathy Williams book had just come out, and the Walk with Grandpa book came out, and the neighbor across the street is a children's librarian in a public school. So she bought those two books for the school library, and she said, now you need to write a book about Christopher Newport. We don't have enough books about him. And I said, who? Because I was new to Virginia, and I didn't realize that he was the British explorer that discovered Jamestown in 1607.
You always hear about Captain John Smith,
Right.
and Pocahontas, but this is the true story, isn't it?
It is.
And tell us a little bit about him.
Well, he grew up in near the North Sea, and his father was a mariner and had a ship, so that was his life, being on ships. And eventually he became a privateer, which is a glorified pirate. And he would take Columbus's route into the Caribbean, and he and his men would rob treasures off of Spanish and Portuguese ships.
So why wasn't he considered a pirate?
Well, because he was hired by the Queen.
I
And so they
see.
called them privateers.
So it's almost like the way we view whether a person is a revolutionary or a terrorist or a freedom fighter. And in those days, it was pirate or privateer.
He is a fancier name.
I
Because he
see.
wasn't working for himself.
Okay. And what happened to him? In one of the battles, you don't think about how horrible it must have been being on these ships, but you capture that, and especially he loses an arm.
Yes.
And that could have stopped almost anybody, but did it stop him?
No. And there's theories that he had a hook and that he was Captain Hook, but he never did have a hook, because that was verified by the historian at Jamestown that there was no hook. Because you might see some books about Christopher Newport with a hook, and he never did. And so he just switched hands and used his sword in his other hand.
Why would I want my child reading this book?
Well, it's a piece of American history, and he made 5 trips to Jamestown. The first 2, he brought people, men, and supplies. And the 3rd, 4th, and 5th trips, he brought women as well. And if he hadn't done that, Jamestown would have died out.
You also talk about the mystery of Roanoke Colony. Have we ever found out what happened to that colony?
No, he never found a shard of pottery, but there are blue-eyed Indians in the area, Native Americans.
Oh, really?
And so there's theories that they intermarried with them, because they never found any evidence that there was even a colony there.
And again, Kathy Williams, Buffalo Soldier, Christopher Newport, Jamestown Explorer, A Walk with Grandpa, and the final one was How a Lemonade Lid Changed My Summer by award-winning author Sharon Solomon. And you won several awards, and the one I noticed is A Walk with Grandpa won the Mom's Choice Award. Tell us about that.
And should be a Mom's Choice Award, because it's really family-oriented, and it's something that parents and grandparents could read, and then they could play word games with their children or their grandchildren.
Why should parents and grandparents consider buying picture books for their children now in this electronic age?
You can cuddle up with a kid, and you can have contact with them. They can turn the pages. It's really more interactive, and it's tangible. You can touch it.
And I think there's one other thing, and that is you can show children that they can make their own picture books too. Sharon, it has been a wonderful experience talking to you. I wish you the best of luck with your books. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
I'm Mark H. Newhouse, author of How to Sell Your Books Checklist and the Midnight Diet Club. And this has been Author's Beat, directed by Don Kanan, author of Alzheimer's Dutiful Daughter, now also an audiobook. Author's Beat was created and produced by Mark H. Newhouse and Don Kanan, broadcast by blogtalkradio.com, and now linked with thevillagesactivities.com, a great new way to promote your business, book, club event, and find out what's going on in the villages for free.